Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode on NSHSS 101. If you're new to the channel, basically what we talk about here is educational stuff and a bunch of NSHSS stuff. And yeah, so in this video, this video is our first episode ever of Voices Unfiltered, where NSHSS members gather round and we debate topics. The topic that we are debating about is all school-based. There's about 4 topics, and we are all going to be talking about it. You may recognize some of the people that we have in today's episode. For example, Henry Shelton, Kira Taylor, and Cali Goode, all guests that have previously appeared on the show. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. But first, if you can, like and subscribe. Looks like we have all ambassadors here today. Thank you so much for joining me for this debate. Let me share my screen and we will go ahead and begin. So we're going to go ahead and begin the debate, but does anyone have any questions before we actually begin? If not, our first debate topic is, should group projects affect individual grades? Oop, sorry. Hallie?
Hi, so I do think that group projects should affect individual grades, but not necessarily that everybody should get the same grade. I think people should be graded individually for their specific contributions and then also how they collaborated with others.
Kira?
I agree with what you're saying that it should still have a contribution to the individual's grade, because in school we need to learn how to work together and communicate with others. So that part should be a grade, but I think it should be a very small portion of the grade, and then the rest is either what you contribute to the group or graded based on the actual accuracy of it, because you can't necessarily not everyone's necessarily going to work well together, but that doesn't mean that you can't just choose not to try. So I think having a small portion of the grade being because of the group project would hold individuals liable to at least start learning those collaboration and communication skills.
Henry?
I do agree that that would be the ideal, that it applies each individual in the group gets a separate grade based on their personal contributions. But unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's easy for the individuals who sort of slack off to take credit for the work done by the individuals who actually did put in the work. And so I feel like even if different students get graded individually, I don't think it would be entirely accurate even in that situation. And then for the second thing I was going to say is individuals who don't have the incentive to participate in the first place, I don't think getting an individual grade really would encourage them to, because these individuals, when they're not doing a group project and they're doing an individual project, also don't put in the adequate amount of effort.
Nora?
I agree with everything that's been said. I also would think we need to take into account the overall project itself, like how it came out as far as quality, how well it fit the criteria. Maybe that could be part of the collaboration grade, or just like how the project came out overall. And I think the professor in that instance would really have to know what everyone's doing, so maybe like delegate it out, or the students delegate it themselves and report, so the professor knows like what was done, and to give everyone their individual grades to know what everyone contributed and how that worked out.
Thank you everyone for your response. Callie?
Hi, so to kind of, I don't think this would be challenged, but go based off of what Henry said, something that's been done at my school personally to like, I guess, amend the whole group versus individual grading thing has been we have collaborated groups on like Canvas or the grading platforms that our school uses, and we also do each have delegated roles. We filled out a form at the beginning of the semester giving each other roles and having like outline tasks and responsibilities, and we signed a team contract, and it basically said like, if you do not follow your responsibilities, there are so many times that it can be brought up and documented before it's brought to the teacher, and then you get dealt with accordingly, I guess. And then I also think the individual grading wouldn't entirely be about motivating those that already don't have a want to work, but not bringing down those who do. Because more often than not, when I hear about like complaints surrounding group grading, it's the people that do put in all the work and they're saying, like, I tried really hard on this and I still got a poor grade because other members in my group didn't pull their weight. And so having individual grading may not be entirely accurate, but I think it would help out the students that did do their part.
Would anyone else like to add anything else? Kira?
I agree that that is like a good standpoint for the teachers holding individuals to like their accountability, but that only works if every teacher does it. Like at my school, we have both the technical side and the academic side, and our academic teachers are really good about making sure everyone's held accountable and we have roles and responsibilities, and we say like I contributed X, Y, and Z. But on the technical side, our shop teachers are like it gets done or it doesn't get done, and what everyone else does is a reflection of your grade. So that would only work if there was a specific system. Like I think it's a really good idea, but without a system holding the teachers to that standard, there'd be no guarantee that all the students would be held to their accountable portion.
Would anyone else like to say anything? Henry?
I just want to add that's a good point that in a lot of these situations, you can't really rely on the teacher to actually care about which student did what percentage of the work and who should be credited what. In a lot of cases, group projects are just a way to easily, categorize and grade people as opposed to grading each student individually. And if it was required by teachers to grade each student individually, in group projects, I honestly feel like they would neglect group projects and just not assign them at all, and would rather just assign individual projects at that point.
Yes, that's understandable. That was great responses, anyone. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to share before we officially move on to the next slide? All right, the next topic. Is academic rigor something sometimes just poor teaching? Henry, you can go ahead.
I have two things to say about this one. First, I think that academic rigor is not necessarily a bad thing. If course is too difficult, you can always leave it early on, or if once you finish it, you decide it was too difficult and you don't want to do something the next level, which might be too hard, you could just choose to do something simpler. So that's like the worst case scenario. But in the best case scenario of having a rigorous course, you actually engage your mind and learn something new and will probably be significantly better at the subject than if you took a course that you can just sort of glide through. So there's that. But secondly, there is not very much correlation between the actual curriculum and the teacher, since in most cases, the curriculum is not designed by the teacher. It's designed by someone else and is just given to the teacher to present to the students. So it can't be really blamed. You can't blame the teachers and say that it's poor teaching if there's academic rigor when it's the curriculum's fault, which was designed by someone else and not the teacher themselves.
Kira?
I agree that the teacher doesn't necessarily have control over how rigorous the course is. And like you said, it's the student's choice to take that. Like I take AP Lang, like that's my choice to take a college course that I know is going to be difficult. But I think at times, if the teacher is assigning busy work that isn't actually challenging your mind, then you're wasting that rigor on being determined to finish every assignment, but without actually learning anything to be able to advance further. So I think that in that sense, the teacher is just assigning work for you to do and grade rather than actually challenging your mind. But it's not necessarily a reflection on it being poor teaching, it's just how the teaching is being directed.
Right, Callie, you can speak, and then Nora.
Okay. I agree with everything that has been said, and I'd kind of like to add that I think sometimes it is reflective on the teacher because like a class that's a really good example of this is physics classes, and this is kind of at the like the education system is responsible for this in a lot of ways because we aren't really taught physics throughout schooling on a deeper level as opposed to like some other institutions or programs like IB schools teach it more cohesively, I guess, so it's easier for them to grasp. And like at my school, we don't have any physics classes until you get to AP physics, and so we have a really low pass rate. And the fact that the teacher we had for that class didn't really understand the subject made it so that it was less of a rigorous course and just one that didn't make sense because there are some teachers that pride themselves on teaching a class that people can't pass. And at that point, it's not academic rigor. I do think that is just poor teaching because if you, as a teacher, are not able to make the curriculum understandable to any of your students, that is reflective on you.
Okay, Nora, you can go ahead and speak now.
I completely agree with everything that's been said. I would also add that a teacher really is there to technically really teach. So they should also be engaging with the work they're assigning, like actually explaining how it connects to what we're learning, what the concept is. And I feel like when a concept is rigorous or challenging, that is the student who chose to take it, but the teacher should make it understandable, should break it down depending on what course level we're at. If it's more of like a easier course, we should still be breaking it down, but even for seniors and that grade level. But the teachers should be making it understandable where you can actually apply it, not just memorize and have to overwhelm yourself having to go through all this excessive workload and try to memorize things, try to understand it with really little guidance. It should be about really just applying it and being able to understand for yourself what the actual course is and what we're learning.
Henry?
Well, in sort of the scenario where that Callie and Nora were talking about, in a class which is a rigorous class, so advanced or an AP or whatnot, or physics, um, in which the class is rigorous, but the teacher also teaches bad. You can't say the rigor is the poor teaching. The poor teaching is the other element of either busy work or just uh, poor explaining, poor lecturing ability, whatever, something like that. That is distinct from the actual rigor of the class. The rigor is completely related to the curriculum, which is unrelated to the teacher. Like you could just read the textbook for a class and determine whether it's rigorous or not. The teacher is dependent on those other factors, which could be poor teaching. I agree. But I think that as far as we're talking about academic rigor, that's disconnected from the teacher.
Kira?
I understand what you're saying about how there is always a certain level of rigor, but I think that some teachers have the ability to choose if their work follows exactly what the curriculum wants, if they make it a little easier and then go through really slowly with their students while still teaching the same points, or if they make it even harder by sort of making the students learn on their own or however they choose to do that. So I think that even though there is a certain amount of rigor in a curriculum, especially in harder classes. Like, obviously, the teachers can't change the AP US history course or they can't change the physics course, but they can choose how they teach it and how hard they're going to make it for the students to pick up and like what sort of deadlines they're going to set. So, to a degree, they have that flexibility, especially depending on your state standards.
Would anyone else like to add on? Okay, I think we can move on to the next. Is it fair that some teachers allow retakes and others don't? Retakes meaning test, or maybe quizzes as well. Actually, I think it's also assignments. Okay, Nora, you can go.
I think it depends on what kind of test it is. So for exams, I don't think that's something they need to do. I haven't had experience with teachers allowing that, and I can understand why. And when it comes to like smaller assignments like unit exams or just like practice tests or not practice tests, like smaller quizzes, I think that's fair to allow retakes because it just helps you learn the material more, understand what you got wrong, so you're able to move forward and learn from those quizzes actually to get to that big exam where there are no retakes.
Henry?
Well, I think if the teacher is given the choice, like the administrators of the school or the district or whatever allow the teacher to choose whether they want to allow retakes or not, it's completely their imperative whether they want to or not. And it's fair either way because ultimately if that's given to the teacher's discretion, then whatever they choose is what you have to accept. And I don't think it's really a matter of fairness. I think that having that ability to retake is sort of a act of grace and not something that you inherently deserve. And as such, it's not necessarily unfair to not have it. It's more like you are getting something extra in being allowed to do it.
Kira?
I agree with what Nora said, especially because tests or exams is really to show that you have mastered the material. But with quizzes and smaller things, there might also be extenuating circumstances that you can explain to the teacher, like what happened, and say, like, I really need a retake because all of this stuff happened. And it's nice to be able to have that grace as a student because if you're doing things to prepare for the quiz, you are not like necessarily ready. That's why the test isn't happening yet. But I do agree with what Henry said that like no teacher should feel like they have to offer retakes, but and it's not necessarily fair or unfair if they don't because it's up to them and up to their style of teaching, but it is good in the sense of providing extra practices for smaller assessments.
Callie?
Hi, so I really like a lot of the points that were made, and Henry, I especially like your perspective of retakes are more of a grace, they're a privilege, not a necessity. And I think it does definitely depend like on what kind of course it is and the kind of teacher you have, because the way that I look at it, the point of taking a class is to learn, not necessarily just to get a grade. But so for, like for smaller things like quizzes, it does make sense to me to allow retakes because it's like the teacher wants to make sure that you're able to be caught up and like you understand the material. But for bigger things like exams, I don't think retakes should be allowed unless they're like really severe circumstances, like how for SATs or whatever, you can like show a reason, like something happened and I can't take the test, like there was a malfunction or whatever reason, and so you can get a retake. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like it shouldn't be something that's upsetting if retakes aren't available to you. I think it just means that you need to work a little bit differently or work around it. Yeah, that's it.
Would anyone else like to add anything? All right, we will move on to the next subject, and it is the last subject. Should students be allowed to eat in class? Henry?
I think in a way this is quite similar to the retake question. because it's sort of just up to the teacher. The classroom is the teacher's domain in a way, so they get to it's their discussion, a lot of things like that, like retakes or if you're allowed to eat or not or whatever. So yeah, personally, I think it's sometimes sort of distracting, so I would prefer if a teacher prohibits it, but it's ultimately the teacher's choice in my mind.
Nora?
I agree with what Henry said. I think it is up to the teacher. And I also think if the student is given the grace to do that, they should be very respectful. Don't be loudly chewing, leave a mess or anything like that. And I also think a lot of students really shouldn't go in assuming, because I've noticed a lot of times, even when it's not like explicitly said that students are allowed to eat in class, they'll do it anyway, which a lot of professors don't seem to care that much or get that worried about it. But I still think students should really take it as a grace, like with retakes, like if the professors, excuse me, are really going to let them do that or not.
Hallie?
Ooh, oh my gosh, sorry. I definitely agree that it is more of like a privilege than anything. It shouldn't be an expectation to be able to eat in class. But I do think that there should be some standards around it and there should be some kind of limitation. Like Nora said, like if you're being distracting or like making a mess, like be mindful because even if it is allowed, this is still a shared space. Like other students still have to sit where you're sitting. The teacher or the janitor, whoever is going to be the one that's responsible for cleaning up after you if you make a mess. And like just other students that are there with you are also there to learn. So if you are going to be eating in class, it should be something that's like not distracting. You're not going to make a mess. You're not going to um inconvenience, I guess, anybody else by eating.
Kira?
So, as somebody with type 1 diabetes, I have a little bit of a different stance on this. I agree with what you guys are saying about how you have to be mindful of the teachers. But a lot of times for me, if I'm like the only one allowed to eat in class, it causes more disruption than it does benefit to the environment. But I'm always really conscious about what I'm eating to make sure it's nothing anyone else will be allergic to. And I'm always like inform the teacher ahead of time that one of my accommodations is being able to eat in class. But I also think that it depends on the school. Like at my school, we start school at 8, but kids start heading to school at 6 o'clock in the morning, if not earlier. So the kids won't eat from like 6 to 1 when our lunches end. So they don't really like at some point in time, they really do need to eat. So I think that there should be a way to work around that, especially because we don't have breaks in between our classes. But I do think that for some teachers, it's harder than others to be able to maintain that, especially because people are more likely to abuse the privilege than they are to just eat their snack quietly and then continue on with their day.
Hallie?
You make a really good point about like how there are sometimes accommodations and how it is helpful to have teachers that allow students to eat. And I totally agree with you as somebody that does eat in class, because it's not for diabetes or anything, but I work out a lot and I don't have like very big breakfasts. So I burn through calories really fast. And so I get tired. And so I eat in class. But I do also think like with the whole like like the students are up early and don't have opportunities for breaks, that should also be taken into account because like if students are there and they're hungry, I think it does definitely help to be like, yes, you can eat snacks, especially because so many studies show that your brain works better when you're like not hungry because if you're hungry or you're tired, you can't focus as well, you can't absorb information as well or any of those things. But I do think there also should be exceptions, like depending on the class. Like if you're taking like a workshop class or something where you have to deal with machinery or you're outside for PE, I don't think eating should be something that's as normalized because that can then be unsafe and it can also create like sanitary issues.
Kira?
I completely agree with what you're saying. Like at my school, we have in all of our shops, we have a safety line, and you can't eat unless you're past the safety line. Because obviously, it's the same thing as you don't want to be unfocused if you're tired or drained or haven't eaten all day. So they're just like, if you're going to eat, tell us and then go behind the safety line to make sure that like you're not going to get rigid metal conduit fluid on your hands and that it also keeps everyone safe because we're not contaminating the food with everything else. But I do think that what you're saying is a really good point about there's definitely certain circumstances that really do make a difference.
Would anyone else like to add anything? All right, that was our last slide, and that was the end of the debate. I do not know why this is not working. But you can see at the bottom, there's a heart, and it says, "Thank you, your voice matters in education." Thank you guys for being here. Your participation is your support to NSHSS 101, and I appreciate you all being here and all participating in this debate. And I would like to apologize because I was expecting a lot more to come. We had a lot of students fill out the form. Um, the Zoom link was personally posted on the College Council. I don't know what it's called, but they have something, but it's not Slack, but I just don't know what it's called. But the Zoom link was posted on there, so they received it. But and we had a lot of forms filled out, but I'm surprised that only a few of you guys showed up. But I'm really glad that you guys showed up. So thank you for showing up and doing this with me. It was very interesting to hear all of your sides. This video will be posted on NSHSS by the end of the month. And if you want your picture to be in the YouTube thumbnail, please send a new taken photo of yourself from the waist to the top of your head. And the image cannot be cut. That means like I need to see your full head, like your full head and your shoulders need to be in the image and it needs to have good lighting. So it's easy to adjust and add with the rest of the images in the thumbnail. So if you want to have your picture in the YouTube thumbnail, please let me know. Send me an email, send me the image, and I will try to get that in for you. So I say that about concludes our debates. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. Our next debate is scheduled to take place sometime in March. The exact time is not decided yet, but hopefully we will have more people here. So thanks again. And unless anyone has anything else they would like to add, I'm gonna go ahead and close the meeting now.